Welcome to Salute Your Sports. I'm Kamenenchev with Tom Castleman. Drew's got another bye week this week, but we've got a fun show planned for you. We'll talk plenty on the NFL playoff matchup this week. And has anything changed with our Super Bowl picks? Tom, probably not, with all the favorites dominating. My Chiefs, your Rams, Drew's Rams, both looking really good. It's going to be a fun show today. Definitely looking forward to talking some NFL playoffs with you.
Absolutely. And before we get into a very exciting divisional round, let's go ahead and kind of recap a little bit what stuck out as far as wild card weekend goes. I know we talked about on the show last week, the year of the upset type of thing. Anything can happen, but for the most part, seemed pretty much on par with the script. The only nominal upset being the 49ers over the Cowboys in a fairly close game. But definitely, there's that saying that the style makes the fight. As I got closer and closer to the game, I felt more and more nervous about that Dallas pick. And of course, everything just kind of made sense with how that game turned out. So what stood out to you, either in that game, which had plenty of its own interesting storylines going on, as well as around the rest of the NFL?
Yeah, Tom, you kind of hit it on the head there. You're saying, we had all these upsets in the NFL, record amount of wins against the spread, record amount of upsets, everything. And then the favorites went 5-1, and they went 5-1 against the spread. They now not only covered, but they won big, covered easily. Bills winning by 30, Chiefs winning by 21. I think Bucks won by 16, but that was some garbage time points. It was was it 31-0? Right. At least it was something like that.
Yeah, it was 31-0, and then Philly scored in the fourth quarter.
So, Philly, that was all domination. We really only had, the Rams dominated. We had two close games. It was Bengals over the Raiders by 7, and they did cover that 5-point spread. And then, of course, we had the Niners winning by 6 against the Cowboys. I told you right before we got on air, I was 6-0 with my picks. I called the 49ers upset, and I was 1-5 against the spread. So I was kind of thinking the favorites would win, but they'd win close, squeak-by type games. They won big instead. A few things that stuck out to me. I may be talking about this later in the show, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it right now. But that Cowboys-Niners game, what was Dallas doing with that last play call there on the QB draw? Mike McCarthy, question marks about him, question marks about Dak. Can he win the big one? Also, 14 penalties for 89 yards. I'm a huge guy on the 49ers. I think 49ers are probably a top 5 or 6 team in the league if healthy. I still think Dallas had a little bit more talent in that game, even though I picked the 49ers. It happened the way it happened simply because Dallas gave the game away. They gave it away with penalties. They gave it away with decision-making. They gave it away with allowing all the points early in the game. So that was a real head-scratcher for me. Just real quickly, I've got to give a shout-out to all the top dogs, the big teams that delivered. How bad were the Patriots with all the drops? But how great were the Bills in a 47-17 win, 308 pass yards, 5 touchdowns for Josh Allen against one of the best secondaries in the league in the Patriots. Bengals getting their first playoff win in 31 years. For the first time ever, you can send the text message saying the Bengals won a playoff game. Chiefs tied 0-0 after the first quarter. I think they got down 7-0, but rallied to win 42-21. Mahomes, 404 pass yards, 5 touchdowns. Travis Kelce had a touchdown pass. Told his mom as a kid it was always his dream to throw a touchdown pass in the NFL. Of course, everyone wants to be the quarterback when they're kids. Well, Travis Kelce's dream did come true. Even he was throwing touchdown passes. On a negative note, really disappointed with how the Cardinals played. Kyler Murray looked horrific. 2 interceptions, 137 pass yards. I think their first 4 drives were all 3 and outs. Matthew Stafford played well, didn't get a ton of yards, but didn't have to. 3 total touchdowns, no turnovers. But I don't really, the Rams weren't that impressive to me. They were good, obviously, but it was more of the Cardinals being bad. The Bills were really impressive, as were the Chiefs, but I think they both also played really bad teams. Niners looked great, but I think the Cowboys gave the game away. The Bengals won as they should have, and the Bucks won as they should have. Actually, the Bucks might have been the most impressive given the injuries. But yeah, a lot of not so close games is what stood out to me. I know you're going with the Rams as your pick. We'll talk about this later in the show. But I don't know. It's supposed to be a wild card weekend. We usually see a lot of wildness and, quite frankly, some pretty boring football over the weekend and Monday, relatively speaking.
Yeah, not a whole lot of reason, particularly in the nighttime slots, for people to stay up past their bedtimes. I mean, Saturday night, Bills just absolutely trounced the Patriots in a game that definitely showed the disparity between those two teams in particular, as far as team speed goes, athleticism. Bills far more athletic and far faster than the Patriots are, who are really good in the regular season playing that brand of football, but not able to kick it up to the next gear. So that's one thing that stood out to me. I mean, Sunday night was a snooze fest after, I think, an intriguing first quarter, maybe. A lot of kicking the ball back and forth. It was incredible. TJ Watt, the presumptuous defensive player of the year, going ahead and just saying, you know what, if the offense isn't going to score, time for the defense to do so. But not a whole lot of intrigue after halftime, give or take on that one. And then, yeah, Monday night, no intrigue later in the day as well. I think one thing that stood out that you didn't touch on was, questionable refereeing, particularly in Cincinnati, Las Vegas, not getting a by the book ruling correct that when there is an inadvertent whistle, the play's dead, it's a do-over, as opposed to letting it stand. I don't think that the whistle affected the play negatively, given that as late as it came, the defender was already beat in the end zone for that Tyler Boyd touchdown. But to have a professional refereeing crew not knowing the rule and not having somebody from the referee office, the league office in New York, to call in, to radio in, however they communicate and say, hey, by rule, this is what we ought to do. I think that's a pretty bad look for the NFL and its officiating. And then, of course, the biggest game, simply by factor, it was one of the closest ones, was 49ers in Dallas. And, poor coaching. You convert on that I think it was 4th and 5, give or take, with the fake punt pass to a wide open gunner. And then you kind of sort of leave the special teams unit out there.
What was that? I don't know. I don't know what that was. I have no clue what that was.
Yeah. And it talk about not knowing the rules, getting a delay of game on that possession because you wait to run your offense in, and by rule, the defense has every right to make a substitution as well, which is why I believe it's the umpire who was standing over the football, making sure Dallas couldn't snap it, so San Fran had enough time to make that substitution. I know it looks like, hey, what are you doing? Dallas fans griping, but it's like your own coaching staff didn't know that rule. They didn't know that rule, again, for placing the ball on the last snap of the game with a questionable play call. Like, I maybe kind of sort of a little bit get it. If you're out thinking yourself,
I'd say you throw it in the end zone twice is what I'm thinking.
Absolutely, that's what you do. I can see, if you want to outsmart yourself, how you get to that point of, let's get a couple extra yards and an easier throw. So it doesn't have to be an arched pass. You can put a little more mustard on it. Go for a traditional, what you ordinarily would, kind of pass play. But again, you're jumping through so many logical loops to arrive to that point that therein lies the mistake, followed up by the execution of give the ball to the official, not to your center, because you can't position the football yourself. Yeah, so just poor interpretations of rules, both for teams and for refereeing, kind of coming into the spotlight. Deserved in one game, a bad game for the refs with Jerome Boger's crew in Cincinnati. Refs did just fine. Undisciplined play by Dallas, both with penalties and just not knowing the proper way to play the game.
I wonder, in my head, I would lean that it's the wrong call, even if they do get one play off. I know it makes it as an easier play, but it's still 20, 25 yards as opposed to 35. Yeah, it's not significantly different. So I'd throw it in the end zone twice. The only scenario I can see maybe running that play is if you do have a timeout, which obviously Dallas didn't, because they had to stop the Niners who are going for it. So that was just very, very questionable. I wonder if Mike McCarthy's going to get fired after that. I mean, I'll be talking more about this later in the show, but I think this isn't the first time we've seen him make questionable decisions. Not the first time we've seen questionable time management on his part. And I'm really surprised that he got that head coaching job in Dallas to begin with. And there's some NFL guys, like former players, are saying, I saw one of the analysts saying that they thought McCarthy was the worst coach on his own staff, saying that the coordinators on his staff were better coaches than him. And that could be the case. I know Kellen Moore is up for the Bears head coaching job. I believe the Cowboys OC, former lefty Boise State quarterback. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was a crazy weekend. The one thing that did stand out to me, and we'll get into this game in a little bit, but I'll make this statement before I let you transition and ask us on that first pick. But I felt that the Chiefs and Bills, given they didn't play great teams, the teams they played didn't play great. But to me, it felt like the Chiefs and Bills are the two top teams in the NFL right now. And it's a shame that it's a second round game because for me, it feels like the winner of that game is going to win the Super Bowl. I think if the Bucs were healthier, things could be different. And obviously they could get a little bit more healthy by Super Bowl's end. You know, by the time the Super Bowl gets there, maybe they have Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones at full strength. But I know they won't have Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown. That much we know for sure. So given Tampa Bay's injuries, to me at the moment, I think the Chiefs and Bills are the two teams to beat. They've got the two best young, talented quarterbacks. They've got amazing offenses, well-coached teams. And really, both of those teams played really good defense. If you look at the second half of the year, I mean, Bills were pretty good the whole season. Chiefs were really good the second half of the year. So that's going to be a big game. Let's get into it. I mean, what do you think about this game?
I mean, I think that this game is going to be, it's like you said, it's the culmination of the rematch from last year's AFC Championship game, and it is unfortunately bumped up a week earlier. It's certainly going to feel fait accompli that no matter who wins the Tennessee-Cincinnati game, they're going to be heavy underdogs to the winner of Kansas City and Buffalo, and I think for pretty good reason. I mean, we're talking about, you know, if not two of the best, the two best quarterbacks in the NFL, just as far as their current level of play is concerned. We're looking at two coaching staffs that are exceptionally well prepared. You look at Andy Reid with Eric Bieniemy, Steve Spagnuolo, a potential head coaching candidate if he gets the opportunities that he ought to. And Steve Spagnuolo, of course, was a former head coach. On Buffalo's side, you have Leslie Frazier, former head coach and current head coaching candidate as your defensive coordinator, and then Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll, also potential for the Bears on the offensive side. So you have great coaching in this matchup, having your players playing at their best. And the great thing is that for the most part, these teams are both healthy. So I don't think that coming out of this game, barring, of course, and fingers crossed nothing like this happens, barring an in-game injury, I don't think either fan base or either franchise can leave this game feeling like they were shortchanged somehow. It's all about both teams playing at their highest level right now. It's going to be really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think these two teams are pretty similar. I think they're both, let's air it out, let's pass the ball. I mean, both the quarterbacks are phenomenal passers. I mean, both these quarterbacks are top 5 in the league in just about every statistic, whether it be yards, passing touchdowns. Both offenses are top 5, whether it's, you know, yards, points per game, etc. And I mean, last two times they played were shootouts, 38-24 Chiefs in the AFC title game last year. And then don't forget about the game earlier this year. The Bills won 38-20 at Arrowhead Stadium. So it's one of those games where there's a lot of firepower. And I think right now, I mean, it's hard. I look at Mahomes, I look at Allen, I look at Brady, I look at Rodgers. Those four are pretty even, if you're being honest. There's not much that separates them at the current moment, but obviously eventually Brady and Rodgers will slow down. They're obviously older. We know they won't be playing as long as Mahomes and Allen, knock on wood, no injuries or anything crazy for those guys. But this is pretty much the two top quarterbacks in the league going forward. Joe Burrow will be in that conversation, probably already is. I actually got Burrow as my number 5 quarterback. I mentioned those top 4 guys, and that's what I thought. Dak Prescott, to me, is a second-tier guy, and he showed it in the last game with all those weapons, couldn't deliver. So I look at this as this is the NFL's guys. And this is arguably, I mean, the Seahawks are up there. There are a few other franchises as well, but you can make a strong case for this being the two best fan bases in football as well. Certainly top 5 fan bases. I would say, like you said, probably top 5 coaching staffs. Both of them, especially if you consider the DC and OC guys too, because the Bills have a great assistant head coaches on that team. So it's kind of, to me, the two teams that will be Super Bowl contenders for years on to come. And the matter is, like, are the Chiefs gonna show that, hey, we're still top dog, or are the Bills gonna say this is a legitimate rivalry? And this is what we'll see in this game. Very similar teams. I think the Bills are probably a little bit better defensively, but not by much, especially if you consider the Chiefs defense that we saw the second half of the season. Ultimately, I like the Chiefs offense a little bit better. And this is the same thing that we talked about last year. And to me, nothing has changed, even though the statistics are probably even closer between the two teams. When it's line them up, biggest game of the season, biggest game of the year, I still feel like the Bills don't have a great running game. Singletary's look better, but I think the Chiefs are maybe a half step better in the running game with or without Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because Williams has been really good. But most of all, this is going to be about the passing game. And I think Mahomes still has 2 first-tier incredible players. He's got Tyreek Hill and he's got Travis Kelce. Josh Allen, all due respect to Dawson Knox, who looked incredible the last game, not to mention Cole Beasley's pretty good, but those are second-tier guys. He's got 1 ace on his team. That's Stephon Diggs. Patrick Mahomes has 2 aces. And he has Andy Reid. We talk about the coaches, but Andy Reid, to me, has to have the edge at head coach. And he's involved in that offense just as much as Eric Bieniemy is as well. And not to mention, Mahomes has the home field. He's got Arrowhead Stadium, which is going to be loud and insane. So I think Mahomes has a little bit better toys. It's like Josh Allen's got that really cool, nice toy. Like that was like really nice. And then Patrick Mahomes has like the nicest toy. He's like, oh, you have that good one? Oh, I've got that one higher model. You've got like the second highest model Super Soaker. Well, Mahomes has the highest level Super Soaker. Not to mention that Mahomes is unreal in the postseason. I mean, he's been okay in the 2 Super Bowls, but if you take out his Super Bowl games, he's been literally the greatest statistical quarterback in playoff history. And heck, you add the 2 Super Bowls in, he's still up there. So he's just next level in the playoffs. And I think them losing last year has got him hyper-focused. I talked about it last week. They're now able to adjust. If teams are going to not let them go deep, they're willing to take the shorter routes. And I think the Bills game was a lesson for them when they lost earlier this season. And you know this, Tom, it's easier to make adjustments when things go poorly. So the Chiefs losing this season's earlier matchup, if anything, helps them, just like it helped the Bills going into it when they lost twice against the Chiefs last year. So give me the Chiefs. It's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be a close game. I'm not highly confident in this game. I will tell you the Bills, give them a 47% chance to win, because I think the Bills are a great team. And I do think no matter who wins this game, that's who I'm going to pick to win the Super Bowl and who I'm going to cheer for to win the Super Bowl. This is arguably the most exciting game of the playoffs, except for maybe the Super Bowl, which could have Mahomes versus Rodgers and Brady, or Allen possibly. But this will be good. The Bengals game the next week, when the Bengals upset the Titans, we'll get to that in a little bit, will be fun too. But this is the one that I've got my eyes on the most.
Absolutely. Well, when we were making our postseason picks last week, I mean, of course, I saw that the Bills winning their game would go up against the Chiefs winning their game. So I have no reason to change my stance. No new information has come to light. It's definitely going to be close. I mean, let's keep in mind that with that 38-20 score, that was with Buffalo winning the turnover battle 4-0. Mahomes' couple of picks, and I believe it was Pringle who had a fumble that Buffalo was able to recover, which led it to being a blowout in Kauffman Stadium. So,
Kauffman Stadium. That was funny.
Arrowhead. Wow.
They're next to each other.
They're next to each other. Exactly. No, in Kansas City. Yeah, that just came out of left field, so to speak.
I like that.
But I mean, Josh Allen played pretty much close to a perfect game. I think he had a 139 QBR, something along those lines.
Sure.
Last time. He's going to need to equal that performance again. And Buffalo, I mean, as we saw with the Dallas game, you can't count on turnovers necessarily, but that's really what this game is going to come down to. I don't think that it's going to be kind of like a gridlock first quarter like we saw between Pittsburgh and Kansas City. It's going to be up and down the field. I think I'd be surprised if the under hit. Not that I'm necessarily going to shade toward that or anything later on in the show, but I definitely expect for there to be offensive fireworks. I'll stick with the Bills. I do think it's going to, of course, come down to a last possession, as so many of these great games do. And here's hoping that that we have that. I mean, I like both fan bases. I like both franchises. So certainly not going to be like unhappy or anything. I don't have like a rooting interest, an active rooting against interest in this game, because Andy Reid's my favorite coach of all time. Patrick Mahomes, of course, is fantastic. Oh yeah, no, Andy Reid is absolutely my favorite football coach.
Well, then cheer on the Chiefs. Come on, Tom. Come on over here.
He's got
Chiefs
his Super Bowl.
Nation, let's go.
I also feel, but like, I also can commiserate with the Buffalo Bills plight, where you're in four Super Bowls in a row and you lose all four.
Heartbreaking.
I wouldn't mind seeing them jumping through some tables in LA in February either.
Sure. No, it's gonna be a good game. One that I'm looking forward to. The next game is going to be interesting. Titans Bengals. Actually, I knew I meant to do something. I needed to look up Derrick Henry's injury update, but it looks like he's probably going to play. I mean, he's been practicing like he's going to play. This will be a good game. I think Titans are 3.5 point favorites, depending on what book you look at. Bengals are one of the hottest teams in the NFL. I mean, I think they rested starters the last week of the season, but you look at the week before that, the win against the Chiefs, and in a 2-week span, Joe Burrow set like all sorts of passing records. This will be a good game. I actually like the upset here. I think even though we haven't seen many upsets in the playoffs, out of 4 games, there's likely to be an upset. Not that it's a major upset, because it's only, like I said, a 3.5 point line. I don't think anyone's going to be shocked by anything in this game. But I like the Bengals. I like the matchup. Titans are 25th in the league in pass defense. Bengals are 7th in pass offense. And if you look at it, the last few games, they were the top passing offense the last quarter of the regular season. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, those guys are tough to stop. T. Higgins, Boyd, so many weapons for the Bengals. Not sure what happens with Derrick Henry. That's the one thing. If Henry's 100% healthy and playing like the Derrick Henry we know, my pick could certainly be wrong, because the Titans have been getting slept on for years, and they were in the AFC title game 2 years ago. But I do think quarterback, as you know, matters a lot in the National Football League, and Tannehill is underrated, no doubt, but I think no doubt the weaker quarterback here. There's something about Joe Burrow, man. I said it last week. He didn't play his best game, but he played pretty solid for his first playoff game. Didn't turn the ball over, which is a key thing you look for in a rookie quarterback in his first playoff game. He's a guy that, to me, just does not seem fazed by the pressure. I mean, Kyler Murray obviously looked like he was fazed by the pressure in his first playoff game, as I thought he would be. I look at, some of these other young guys, Mac Jones, who actually Mac was a little bit better than the stats show. I think his team had a lot of drops in that game, but obviously that seemed to affect him a little bit at least. Joe Burrow's cool, man. He is a cool customer, and I look for him to lead the Bengals on the road in Tennessee, pick up a win, and get the upset. As I predicted before the playoffs, I said Bengals are going to the AFC title game, so why change anything now?
Yeah, we are in lockstep on that one. Reading about Derrick Henry as of about 2 hours ago, he did practice, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to play, because he's still on IR. He's designated to return, but has not been officially activated yet. So I imagine that's just a little bit of, gamesmanship, whatever, with the Tennessee coaching staff. I have every confidence that, if he's at a point where he can't make the foot injury any worse, he's going to be out there playing, because Tennessee's going to need him in this game. Tennessee has managed to get by the season pretty well with what I would somewhat consistently say is like a less talented roster than a lot of the teams that they faced. I mean, I would say that they're probably less talented than, let's say, the 49ers. They picked up a win there. I mean, had a couple of duds as well, but I'm definitely going to go with the Bengals on this one. I think that they have, I mean, I feel like it's tedious to say they have momentum, but I think that they are going to be good enough to win this game. The thing to watch out for is Mike Vrabel has been an outstanding coach this year. It's incredible that Tennessee got the number one overall seed and that crucial bye week to advance to the divisional round unscathed. He's going to have something cooked up. So the Bengals are going to have to be prepared to execute against the Titans and also be prepared to potentially see some different looks, some things that they might not ordinarily expect, because Mike Vrabel obviously is very well versed with a good coaching staff coming, of course, from New England, playing for Bill Belichick, I believe coaching there as well. He'll have something in line for the Bengals in this one, but give me Cincy.
Yeah, I think Mike Vrabel's an excellent coach. You talked about it. Like, maybe the roster's a little bit better than you give them credit for, but certainly I more or less agree with your point. You know, they shouldn't be number one in the AFC, but they are, and the coach was a big part of that. But yeah, let's go with Cincinnati. Again, I think both of these games could go either way. Quite frankly, I think all four games this week could go either way. I know that's a cop out, but I think that's the truth.
That's where, I mean, like, it's the playoffs. That's where it's at. There, after this first round, there are no easy calls as far as the playoffs go. So, of course, like, that's the caveat we have for all of these picks is they could go either way. That's because the teams are that good. Last week with the wild card round, nobody was giving Pittsburgh a chance, and rightfully so. This week, there's no more cupcakes.
Agreed. Well, let's move to the NFC. What do you think over there?
NFC, we have the Packers getting into action up in Lambeau against the 49ers, and this seems kind of similar enough to being in line with a similarly styled fight that the 49ers just got through with the Dallas Cowboys in terms of, really good quarterback. In this case, obviously, Aaron Rodgers is a step up over Dak Prescott. Devontae Adams is a step up over Dallas's receiving core, although Dallas, I think, is a good bit deeper. And then, of course, solid run game. So I think it's going to come down to the same things it always does for San Francisco. Two coaches who know each other very well. Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur have worked together in the past. So I think it's going to be a really interesting game. Again, style makes the fight. Is it going to be the ground game, the play action that San Francisco brings? And are they going to be able to get enough pressure without blitzing Aaron Rodgers? Because if you blitz him, he's going to carve you up alive. You got to get there with four.
Well, they have Nick Bosa, and Nick Bosa is pretty good. So he's a guy who could pressure Rodgers. I think I think both of these two coaches are interesting because I think these are actually, for the most part, two of the better coaches in the league, but they've both had some synonymous failures in the biggest moments. Obviously, Matt LaFleur last year not going for fourth down with Rodgers, electing to kick a field goal. Then they're down like 4 or 5, giving the Bucs a shot to run the clock out. That's exactly what they did instead of going for a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to tie the game. And then obviously, I know this wasn't just Kyle Shanahan, but he was the OC on that Falcons team that blew the 28-3 lead against the Patriots. So those guys both have a little something to prove because I think the games are and the seasons are long. And overall, I think both of these coaches are great. I mean, Shanahan getting the Niners to the Super Bowl a couple years ago was a big achievement. Niners back where they are despite all the injuries. And Green Bay, I mean, I think Green Bay has a more talented team than Tennessee, but I think Green Bay to me, definitely not the most talented team in the NFC overall. And I think Aaron Rodgers disguises some of their weaknesses. But let's not forget the coach. I mean, one player doesn't make everybody just magically better. So I think LaFleur's been a really good coach. 49ers have the blueprint to beat the Packers. They're a team that plays good defense. They have a good running game. They actually are able to play in cold weather games because of their D and running game. I mean, it's a rematch of the NFC title game 2 years ago, which the 49ers won. But this time, the Packers are at home. I mean, it was 30-28 this season. In the earlier meeting, the Packers kicked the game-winning field goal as time expired. So to me, these teams are pretty even, honestly, in talent, pretty even in coaching. I almost even think, like, overall, the 49ers might be dare I say it, slightly better overall as a team. I mean, you take the two quarterbacks out of the equation, I think San Fran might have a little more depth. But I think, again, in the 49ers record, by the way, they have a worse record for two reasons. They had injuries again this year, and they play in the toughest conference in football in the
Hmm.
NFC West. But I think, to me, I like Rodgers more than Garoppolo. And I think Garoppolo is vastly underrated. I've said this on the show multiple times. I like Jimmy G, but Aaron Rodgers is probably a top two quarterback in the game. And I think it makes a difference. Rodgers makes a difference. Packers are undefeated at home. I like the 49ers to cover that 5.5, 6-point spread wherever you're getting it. But I think Green Bay is going to have just enough to win at Lambeau Field. But again, very little confidence in this game as well. San Fran could definitely make things interesting for Green Bay. I think Green Bay is not happy to play San Francisco. I honestly think outside of the Bucks, this is the most dangerous team in the NFC for Green Bay. I think Green Bay, Tampa, and the Niners are the three most dangerous teams. I think given how much the Niners own the Rams, given how much the Cardinals aren't ready for the spotlight, and obviously the Cowboys not ready for the spotlight, and the Eagles just not, quite frankly, Eagles are like the Steelers. Eagles and Steelers did
Hmm.
not belong in the playoffs. They
No.
got in because they changed with the extra 7 teams, and they played in that weak NFC East division. So this is not a good matchup for the Packers. I think the Packers would have rather had the Cowboys. I think they would have rather had the Rams. They would have rather had the Cardinals. I'm going to pick Green Bay, but it is not going to be easy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I see no reason for me to go, try to separate head hard or anything like that. I'm going with San Francisco in the upset outright for this
Sure.
game. They've had a vastly improved pass defense. I mean, you do the whole you take out one. If you go from 2 through 53, I think you definitely take San Francisco's roster overall. But that one is a pretty significant one with Aaron
Sure.
Rodgers, especially the rapport that he has with Devontae Adams in particular. There's a reason why they're so efficient in the red zone. It's because Devontae Adams is masterful with his footwork. If you see what he's able to do to cornerbacks to gain either an outside or inside leverage based on how he has them lined up, and Rodgers knows exactly where to go. He sees the same things that Devontae does, and they both execute exceptionally well. Um, that's going to be a key in the red zone, at least. If San Francisco can keep them out or at least keep them away from the goal line where that's going to be super effective, I definitely think that San Francisco has a great opportunity to win this game. And what's the best way to keep Green Bay from scoring points? It's to keep them off the field, quite frankly. And you can do that with a strong running game that has seen Elijah Mitchell, a 6th-round draft pick, do very well for somebody with that pedigree. Debo Samuel used both as a receiver and a running back. Lots of play action stuff that they run through Jimmy G. Interesting to see what's going to happen with that quarterback situation in the offseason because you don't trade up to draft Trey Lance and have him sit for 2 years. So there's going to be a market for a quarterback who I would say is capable, but definitely I don't think can step up and excel. This feels very Bryce Young, Stetson Bennett type of comparison. We're almost doing at the
Sure.
professional level, of course. But give me San Francisco in part because I want to see the Packers lose, but in part because San Francisco has a very real chance with their style of football, their brand of play, to pull out this upset.
Yeah, one thing I want to say about Aaron Rodgers that I think, and we'll probably talk about this more if they do win and if they do make the Super Bowl or make the NFC Championship game, because I was having this debate with someone at work. I think Aaron Rodgers is very, very smart with the football and very careful. If you
Hmm.
look at like passing yards over a season, Aaron Rodgers is almost never top 5 in the league. He's usually top 10. Obviously, he's a very good passer, but he was 11th in passing yards per game this year. And I think even lower in passing yards because he missed a game or two and maybe left the last game early. But
Hmm.
he's not a guy that necessarily is going to throw it all over the yard. He'll make great passes because he's a great player. But that's one thing. Like that's why I like Patrick Mahomes better, and we'll get into this more later. But I look at Rodgers as that guy who's less likely to lose you a game, and Mahomes is more likely to win you a game. I think it would be really interesting to see what happens if Jimmy G makes the Super Bowl or even wins the Super Bowl, how can you not bring him back? Because I'll be honest with you, Tom, I think the 49ers made a huge mistake in picking up Trey Lance. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is better than Trey Lance. I think Garoppolo is an above average starting quarterback in the league in my book. I don't see Trey Lance being above average. I think Trey Lance will be a better runner, dual threat guy. But if I'm the Niners, I would keep Jimmy G. But it would be interesting if Jimmy G does play well and the team does make a deep run. What they do with him, because I think he actually didn't even play that good in the Cowboys game, which tells you how good their team is. They were able to beat the Cowboys without a great performance from Jimmy Garoppolo. So that's a great 49ers team. I like the Packers, but I'll definitely be picking the Niners in locks of the week, and that pick wouldn't shock me.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'll be a great game to see, of course, on Saturday night. But then, there's going to be another big one on Sunday. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, after absolutely just thrashing the Philadelphia Eagles, are now going to be hosting the LA Rams. I'm sure that Los Angeles is more than happy to be traveling to Tampa as opposed to Green Bay for this upcoming weekend. I'm not sure if these two teams played earlier the season, but
the Rams beat them by 10 at home.
That's right. The Rams beat them by 10 in LA, and Tampa's looking very, very different, especially on the injury front with Godwin out, Antonio Brown no longer on the team. So do you smell another upset pick here, Common, or are you going with the favorite?
So Tampa's
Don't you love this matchup also? Like, don't you love these two teams in particular? You're going to be happy no matter what happens with this game.
That's why I want the 49ers to make it. I mean, I look at these NFC teams, like if I think of teams I don't like in the NFC, I don't like the Bucks, I don't like the Packers, I don't like the Rams. It's like, oh, why are you doing it? I don't like the Cowboys either. I wanted the Cardinals and 49ers and the Eagles are the ones I like. Obviously, I didn't like the Eagles though, because they're the worst. Like, didn't like them to make it far. But it's tough. It's tough. I mean, honestly, on paper, the Rams probably should win. I think that they actually, given that they won by 10 in the earlier season meeting with the matchups they have and the injuries the Bucks have, I think if the Bucks are fully healthy, the Bucks are slightly more talented. If the Rams at the moment, because the Bucks aren't healthy and Rams are slightly more talented. But I think the Bucks are going to win. I still don't trust Matthew Stafford. I think even the ESPN guy said this on the Monday night game. That game didn't really do anything to tell you much about the Rams. It was more of the Cardinals just flat out were not ready. So I know Matthew Stafford, I've talked about how he struggled in the postseason. I know he's been on the Lions, but he's turned the ball over a lot in his limited postseason career. So I still am not ready to trust Matthew Stafford. I really am not ready to trust him. And I trust Tom Brady, even though I think Tom Brady gets a little bit overhyped. He is incredible, and he is incredible in the playoffs. And this team was there last year, and they're a really good football team. They're at home where it does make – see, here's the thing about the Bucks and Packers. This has been a weird year where the road teams, on average, have done just as good as the home teams, close to it. The Bucks had one home loss, and the Packers had 0. So those are two teams that do actually take their home field advantage seriously, and it has worked for them. So I'll go with the Bucks because I like Brady more than Stafford. I think it's a common thing I'm going with. I think the Rams, like the 49ers, their overall roster is probably a little bit better than their opponents. But I think the difference in quarterback is pretty big. I mean, Stafford had a great season. He's a great player, but I think Brady is better for sure. So, I mean, and that's kind of the same deal on with the Titans-Bengals game. I went with the better quarterback, I felt, in every matchup. So I won't get them all, but I'm willing to bet that I'll get at least 3 out of 4 because in the National Football League, biggest stage, the team with the better quarterback does tend to fare pretty well.
Yeah, I think the thing that I keep in mind with the LA Rams is that they weren't bringing in Matthew Stafford to necessarily uplift their team per se. That he was brought in to just kind of run the engine that Sean McVay has put together with the game plan that he puts together, the offense he has constructed. that accentuates getting the ball into, playmakers' hands and letting them do work. Odell Beckham Jr., classic example of that. Cooper Kupp, of course, a classic example of that. Robert Woods before he was injured. And as far as like the big matchups, I'm looking forward to Jalen Ramsey versus Mike Evans. We've seen Jalen Ramsey capable of moving all over a formation, so it would not it actually surprised me more if he weren't shadowing the most viable receiver that Tampa has. And of course, what's the one thing that has tripped up Tom Brady literally and figuratively the most in his career? Consistent interior pressure. Aaron Donald is an incredible player. He doesn't have necessarily the eye-popping numbers as far as sacks go because he plays on the interior, but even still, he's putting up great numbers on that front as well. So I'm going to go with the Rams. No surprise, I'm sticking with the Super Bowl pick that I have. It's going to be another, of course, these are all going to be fun games to watch. I'm looking for, it's going to really come down to Matthew Stafford and if he makes a boneheaded play or if he tries to do too much. If he can accept and be a little bit humble to the role that you don't have to go and win the game necessarily. You just have to maintain everything. You don't have to be extraordinary. You just have to be you. That kind of feels awful saying after 4 years of Matt Nagy. But anyway, I'm sticking with the LA Rams on this one.
So, Tom, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you have picked the underdog in all 4 games to win outright.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, you picked, granted, again, most of these lines are very small underdogs, but you did pick the Bengals, who are like 3.5 point underdogs. You picked the Bills, who are like 2.5 point underdogs. Niners are like 5.5, 6 point underdogs. And then you went with the underdog right now in the Rams, 3 point underdogs. I went with did I go all favorite? No, I went on one underdog.
No, Bengals he had as the underdog.
Yeah, I went Bengals underdog, then I went the favorites otherwise. So that's very interesting that you picked 4 underdogs. Again, I think these teams are all pretty close. Nothing would shock me. So I don't think it's like a traditional underdog because normally when you get to even the second round, typically a lot of times, at least the 1 seeds in each conference, you feel like they're still clearly better. But I don't really feel that that's the case in any of these games. I don't think any team is clearly better. And that speaks to the parity that we saw this season in the NFL. It speaks to the fact that there's not a single team that had, less than 4 losses. I mean, it was even 5 losses. Did anyone have 4 losses only? I don't even think so. No, Packers maybe. Packers might have had 4 losses. Or was it 5? No, it was 5 because they lost the last game. Did they not? I think Packers were 12-5, and they might have had the best record in the NFL. And Chiefs were 12-5.
13-4.
Okay, so Packers were 13-4, but there's one 13-4 team, and the rest were 12-5 or worse. So that speaks to the parity in the NFL. I'll ask you this. I mean, has anything changed? You're going Bills, Rams. I'm going Chiefs, Bucks, Chiefs winning it all. Has anything changed? I mean, I don't think for you because your teams both played amazing. So did mine, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, nothing's really changed in my mind. I mean, I could definitely see flipping over to Buffalo instead of the Rams winning the Super Bowl. But for now, I'll stick with my current pick just because that's what I've had the Rams all the way, all season long. I had them ever since they made that Matthew Stafford trade.
You got to.
So I'm gonna ride this one out. But yeah, nobody really showed anything that was super surprising in terms of underperforming. Everybody pretty much performed up to or exceeding par. So definitely encouraging.
Yeah, a couple other things to add. For me, like I said, that the Chiefs-Bills game earlier in the show, I look at the winner of that game as the Super Bowl champ. Those were 2 very talented teams going in. Chiefs struggled a lot early in the season. Bills struggled a lot sort of mid-season, but they're both playing great ball down the stretch, both playing great ball in the playoffs. So it's the right timing for them. And I just want to throw this one out there, an interesting parallel in the 2 conferences. I look at the NFC teams, all the 4 NFC teams left, a lot of them are sort of built in the win now mode. Obviously, the Rams traded away all their draft picks the next couple of years. I think literally, I don't think they have a single draft pick next year. Is that right, Tom?
I will double check that.
And if they do, it's like a late one or maybe one. I know they traded away, I believe, all of their first 3-round picks. So they're in win now mentality. Matthew Stafford isn't really old, but he is on the tail end of his career. I mean, look at Aaron Rodgers. This man could retire any minute now. He may not be in Green Bay next season. They're in win now. Jimmy G is in win now. Are you talking? He may not even be the starting quarterback on his team next year. And then you look at Tom Brady, who, believe it or not, has to retire at some point. So all these NFC teams are kind of like built for now. And I think a lot of these teams are built for maybe another year or two. But I think most of these teams, as constructed, I mean, and they, they're winning organizations. They still may be in the running. But in theory, like in 3 to 4 years, I don't know that any of these current NFC top dogs will necessarily be built to be top dogs going forward. Whereas in the AFC, I look at the Chiefs, I look at the Bills, I look at the Bengals with Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow. That's not only the future of the NFL. I mean, it's the present of the NFL, but definitely the future. Those are teams that we'll see in those situations for years to come.
Absolutely. Really quickly, I think the Rams have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think they have like 8 picks this year, but none in round 1 or 2. And actually, they don't even own their own 3rd or 4th round picks. They're getting some compensatory picks. So their first actual pick that they've had all along that they have is in the 5th round. Everything else above that they've traded off. They just get a couple of compensations for players having signed on other teams.
Okay. Well, there you have it. All right. So Tom is still rolling with the Rams to win it all. Did Drew pick the Rams or Bills to win it all? I can't remember which one.
His preseason was Rams over Bills, and so he's sticking with that upon having that refreshed in his memory. So he's still looking nice and dandy from the beginning of the season.
And I'm rolling with Chiefs over Bucks. All right. Well, hey, let's move on to locks of the week, Tom. Drew is the locks master. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. He hasn't been as good with picks, though. I did beat him pretty good in NFL Pick'em this year. But when it comes to locks, this man is Nostradamus. And another 4-1 week for him. Raiders covering. Actually, the one he missed was Raiders covering 5 against the Bengals. Bengals winning by 7. He had the Bills -4 over the Pats. Bills winning by 30. He had the Niners +3 at the Cowboys. Niners winning by 6. Rams -3.5 over the Cardinals. They won by 23. And a Cardinals-Rams under 49.5. That one had 45. I was the opposite, 1-4. I actually went up against him in a lot of those picks. I had Bengals-Raiders over 49.5, 45 points there. Steelers +12.5 at the Chiefs. They lost by 21. Eagles +8.5 against the Bucks. They lost by 16. Pats didn't cover. Niners did cover for me. That's the one I got. And then, Tom, you were 3-2. Cowboys didn't cover. Bengals did cover. Eagles, Bucks under, you got right. Then you had Nuggets covering against the Clippers -3. Clippers rallied to win by 2. And you had Jaren Jackson Jr. over 5.5 rebounds, doubled up with 11. So you got your NBA prop in pretty solidly. I'm going to read off Drew's picks this week. Then we'll get into you, and then we'll get into me to wrap up our locks before we head into statements and trivia. All right, so this is Drew's picks. I've got my phone out. He has Titans -3.5 over the Bengals. He has Rams +3 against the Bucks. Bucks-Rams over 48.5, and Bills +2.5 against the Chiefs. What do you have? Are you going up against them? Because last week you were scared to go up against them, and I think you were wrong. So it's a pretty scary proposition.
I won against them. I had the Bengals one.
Okay. Well, you missed one, didn't you?
I got the better of the Bengals-Raiders matchup. He got the better, as did you, of the 49ers-Cowboys matchup.
Gotcha.
This week, I picked all 4 road teams to win an upset, so I'll go ahead and take them all on locks of the week as well. So that's Bills +2.5 on the road, 49ers +6, Bengals +3.5, and then Rams +3. So Drew and I are facing off on one pick and agreeing on a couple, actually, with some of those upsets. And then I will continue going with an NBA player props. Give me Karl Anthony Towns over 23.5 points going up against the New York Knicks tonight,
Excellent.
which is Tuesday, January 18th,
Yeah.
as of recording.
It's not NBA or it's not locks of the week without Tom going NBA prop nowadays.
It's getting
All right.
thinner and thinner on the NFL side. I couldn't pick a total or I couldn't pick an
Sure.
over-under, so I decided I'll go with a prop on this one.
All right. Well, I do have an over-under. I'll get to it in a second. I've got the Bengals plus 3.5 at the Titans. I talked about it earlier. 7th best pass offense against the 25th best pass defense. Joe Burrow and company are rolling. I like Joe Burrow better at quarterback than Tannehill. I'm unsure about Derrick Henry and how healthy he'll be. Just a feeling the Bengals cover, and I think they probably win. So the fact that I think they're going to win with those extra 3.5 points gives me good feeling about them. I found the Chiefs at -2. I know you had yours at 2.5, but I've got the Chiefs -2. I'm going to go with that for myself. Two great QBs in this game. I do like Mahomes a little bit better than Josh Allen. I also like Andy Reid a little bit better as the head coach. And I said this earlier in the show, Josh Allen has Stephon Diggs, who's an A-level type player, but Mahomes has two. He's got Kelsey and Tyreek Hill. Chiefs at home, too. That's got to give him just a little bit of an edge. And, I mean, a 2-point spread is so little. I mean, it's pretty rare that, you win typically by 3 or more. And I look for Kansas City to win by 3 or more here. And I do like the over in this game. Chiefs Bills over 54.5 points. I looked at the weather forecast. Looks like no bad weather. Don't expect any snow or rain as of right now. That could change, of course. As someone who's lived in Missouri, I know how much that does flip. But at the moment, forecast is looking good. Two of the best QBs and offenses in the league. Expect a shootout. 38-20 Bills earlier this season, 58 points. We had 38-24 Chiefs, 62 points in last year's AFC title game. Both of those went over 55. I expect more than 55 again here. Then I like the Bucks -3 over the Rams. I know I talked about this earlier. Rams statistically, considering the Bucks injuries, maybe the Rams should win. Maybe the Rams should cover. But by golly, I trust Tom Brady at home a lot more than I trust Matthew Stafford on a road playoff game. Just picked up his first ever playoff win. I don't think he gets a second. Give me the Bucks to cover -3 against the Rams. And finally, this line to me is a little high considering how you're picking the Niners. I almost picked the Niners myself. So 49ers with 6 points, +6. I feel great about this one. I'm giving the Packers the win outright, even though I do think it's a toss-up. 49ers have the team to beat Green Bay. They match up well. They have a good defense. They run the ball well. Those are things you need in a cold weather game at Lambeau Field. They do have a pass rusher, Nick Bosa. They lost 30-28 on a last-second field goal in this season's earlier matchup. And they beat the Packers 2 years ago in the NFC title game. So I think San Fran maybe loses a close game, but I think they cover +6.
Interesting. As you were saying that over-under line, I kind of dismissed it earlier because on Bovada it's currently at 55. I think it was as high as 57.5 as I was doing my research. So that's come down a bit to a much more palatable number that if we were doing 6 picks, I would throw that one in. That's a nice one.
54.5 on DraftKings.
No, I'm just saying
phone.
Right now
It's
on
moved.
Bovada it's 55, but it's moved down a couple of points. So I went from dismissing it to now looking at it and being like, yeah, each team could put up 28 points each. We can see a game in the low 30s. So
Sure.
I think that's gonna be a pretty good one for you.
I like it. I'm due. Let's make it happen. All right, Tom, you know this. I like you liked themes, so I'm gonna roll with some more playoff trivia. I don't know. Do you have trivia this week or no?
I mean, I have 2 baseball related ones.
Do you want to do one of them?
I'll do one of them. Do I do the one that's like incredibly difficult?
Whatever you want. I'm game with either.
I'll go for the one that's not quite as difficult because this is at least a player that you and I would both know.
Okay.
So there is a club of one of
Ooh.
this player in MLB history. This person is part of the 40 home run, 40 doubles, and 40 stolen base season. Only one player has hit each of those benchmarks in a given season. Can you name that player.
Sure. Barry Bonds.
Nope.
Alex Rodriguez.
Nope. A
Ken
good
Griffey
player,
Jr.
but not an all-time great player. Good, but not great.
No, so it's not Ken Griffey Jr. then. Never mind.
Yeah, not going to be a Hall of Famer.
Not going to be a Hall of Famer?
I'll look at the numbers, but probably not.
40 home runs, 40 steals, and 40 doubles.
Yes, in one season, he hit all of those benchmarks, and he's the only player to ever do so.
Holy cow. And I mean, and I don't know, with baseball, you're probably right. If he is a Hall of Famer, he's obviously going to be a lower level Hall of Famer. So this is
not even close to the Hall of Fame.
Not even close?
No.
That's actually a pretty hard question. Gosh golly, what's your other one? That's going to be really hard.
Oh yeah, the other one is impossible. I only know it because I had like an old baseball card from like the 1990s.
Well, maybe you have to tell me the answer to that one because now I'm curious.
Okay.
Why don't you give me a clue? Give me the team.
So
I know it's kind of a big clue. Or if you have another clue, go ahead.
Okay, so he's played on multiple teams. He's been in both the American League and National League. He's played two positions. He's been both an infielder and an outfielder.
40 stolen bases.
Signed a big contract with the Chicago Cubs.
Oh, Alfonso Soriano.
There you go.
That gives it away because he was second base and outfield.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, how many career home runs does he have? About 300 more?
412 career home runs. But looking at some of his other numbers, only a 28.6 wins above replacement, so not nearly good enough.
And then what's his
on
average?
Defense. Batted .270. His on base was on base. Yeah, 32% of the time he got on base. So definitely one of those players who had like a couple like really outstanding years at the plate, but by and large never really a great defensive player. And
he had a lot of stolen bases though too, right? How many steals did he have?
289.
I mean, it's a decent amount. I mean, I agree.
Amount, yeah.
I think he's not going to make the Hall of Fame, but I don't think he's like so far off. I mean, I think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame of guys who don't make the Hall of Fame. One of the top level guys who don't get in. I mean, given that it's baseball, he's not getting in. If this was basketball, he might get in with numbers like that.
For sure, yeah.
Equivalent to NBA numbers.
Yeah, like he finished third in Rookie of the Year. Let's see, he was an all-star for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like 7, 8 years in a row he was an all-star. Had a couple of, top 10 MVP finishes.
Sure. Very good player.
Yeah, that's exactly the way. A very good player, had a couple of great seasons, but by no means in one of the all-time greats.
Give me real quickly your other trivia question. If I don't know it right away, I'll have you just tell me the answer.
So 30 players in MLB history have hit 50 home runs in a season. All except one have had at least another 30 home run season. So who is the one player who hit 50 home runs in 1 year?
I know it.
But has never hit more than 30 at any other
Brady Anderson.
Yep.
Yeah, the former Baltimore Oriole.
Yeah, you want to talk about roided up.
I don't know the easier one.
Like, that's such a tough one just because, like, it was such an anomalous season. It was before, like, I was really paying attention to baseball. It's literally just because I had a card in my collection growing up with that stat.
And he's a pretty skinny guy. I mean, obviously, you never know. It's possible he used steroids. And maybe that's the season that he did use them for one season if he had that many more. But gosh, just by looking at his frame, though, if you've seen him, does not look like a guy that used steroids. But you don't know. I mean, I don't want to play that game because it's so hard because he did play in that steroid era. But he was a pretty skinny, tall, lanky guy, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, no, definitely not a big bruiser at all. I'm just Googling it now, and it's just like there's a bunch of suspicion. I'll have to do some digging to see like if anything ever came of it. But it's one of those things where it's just like, oh, I'll dabble with the steroid thing. Hits 50 home runs, looks at his track record and goes, Yeah, people will catch on quick. I better stop this stuff.
Oh my God. All right. Well, hey, I've got some playoffs trivia. I think you're going to
Go
get
for it.
some of these guys. I don't think you'll get all of them.
Here we
But
go.
comes as no surprise, Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick has by far the most playoff wins by an NFL coach with 31. Can you name the other 4 coaches in the top 5 playoff wins of all time?
Okay, so he went to a bunch of championship games, so I think Andy Reid ought to be up there.
Andy Reid is 4th with 18, and I'll tell you this: the
Hmm.
guy who's in second has 20. There's 2 guys who actually have 20.
Mm.
Actually, one guy, excuse me, has 20. Another has 19. Then we got 18, and then 17. So Andy Reid most likely is going to move into second all time in career playoff wins. And who knows? Could
Could
make
be
a
this
run for
year.
Bill Belichick. But this year, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl this year,
Hmm.
that's what, 3 more wins, right? So he would move into
That'll do it.
second on his own if they get 3 more wins.
That should be the first question he gets asked after winning the Super Bowl is, how do you feel having the second most career playoff wins?
He'll be
That'd
like,
be a
I feel like
great,
I'm going to go eat a cheeseburger. That's what
that'd
he'll
be a
say.
great, almost like troll question for the Super Bowl. So we got Andy Reid.
Yeah, so
I'm
he's
not,
4th all time with
yeah,
18 right
I'm
now.
not super familiar with historical playoff structures, but I feel somebody like Bill Walsh has to be up there. Maybe Don Shula.
Don Shula,
Okay.
3rd with 19. 3rd with
Um,
19. I think you should get the second place guy. I don't
second
think you're going to get the
place.
5th place guy. The second place guy is a guy who won multiple Super Bowls. Pretty legendary coach.
Would it be Jimmy Johnson?
Not you're getting warm though. It's not Jimmy Johnson. But
Jimmy
think about
Johnson.
you're very warm with that one. Think
Okay, that
about
could
maybe the
go.
Cowboys coach 10 years before, maybe 15 years before that.
Oh, would that be Tom Landry then?
Tom Landry has the second most ever right
Hmm.
now with 20 playoff wins.
It's kind of fascinating that stood up for so long.
Yeah.
And also, goes to show just the greatness of Bill Belichick with that. Okay, so now I need to get the 5th place person.
Yes. And he's got 17.
17. You said this was going to be difficult.
Not incredibly difficult though. This is a guy who coached while we he coached while we were young. So he is a guy that, it's not too old school. It's a name that you
Tony
should know.
Dungy?
Not Tony Dungy.
See, I don't think the Rams were good enough for as long. They had Mike Martz, so it wasn't Mike Martz. Would it be Vermeil?
Not Dick Vermeil. I'm
Uh,
gonna pull up the list actually now.
Coach
I wrote down the
really
top
young.
5 for myself, but I'm pulling up the rest.
Oh, Bill Cowher?
Not Bill Cowher.
Oh, wow.
That's a good guess though.
Well, yeah, because he had such longevity in Pittsburgh. Who else was really good, really consistently? Not Brian Billick.
So this guy was really, really good earlier in his career. Maybe not as good later in his career. Bill Cowher, by the way, to answer your question, it was tied for 8th with 12 wins.
Gotcha. Good earlier in his career, not as good later. Would it be Reeves? Dan Reeves?
Not Dan Reeves. Pulling up his coaching record. Yeah, he was real good in the 80s and early 90s. And then, well, here's a clue. This could give it away, but maybe
Would it
not.
be Shanahan?
No, he took a long break from coaching, long break, and then came back again. And we would have known him as more of an older coach. And when we would have watched him play, his teams weren't as good. Came back to the same team. He was a legendary coach with his team, won 3 Super Bowls with them in the 80s and 90s, and then took a long break, 12-year break exactly.
Oh,
from
Joe
coaching.
Gibbs.
Joe Gibbs with the
There
Washington football team.
Yeah, I did forget about him, yeah.
Yeah, he started off with a bang in the playoffs. Actually, his first playoff appearance, he went 4-0, won the Super Bowl. His second year, they went 2-1, made the Super Bowl.
Mm.
So he won the Super Bowl in 82, 87, and 91. He
Yeah,
had
no, like
at least
I had it between him and Parcells when you were starting to give those clues as far as like took a break and came back. So,
I didn't realize he took that long of a break because he was involved in NASCAR, of course, too.
mm.
So
Oh, I
a
didn't know that.
12-year break.
Wow, that's a good
Interesting.
trivia question.
Yeah, I like that one. All right. Wow, pretty quick show today, which is fine. We were just focusing on NFL.
Hmm.
Two of us. I thought we had some good discussion. Before we get out of here, though, we do have our statements and salutes of the week. What you got?
So my statement of the week is that old idiom, that maxim, that less is more. And of course, referring to this directly as a playoff proposition. We've seen the past couple of years with the NFL playoffs, they've expanded it, include a seventh seed. And outside of the Bills Colts game, which was a 3-point affair, pretty much been a blowout. And this weekend was no exception, with Tampa Bay clearly better than Philadelphia, Kansas City clearly better than Pittsburgh. I understand this gets more revenue for teams. I understand that this increases the number of games that we get to watch. But when people are tuning out at halftime for a lot of these games, it kind of makes you question if it's really worth it as far as a competitive product to put on the field. We see this with the college football playoff. They're talking about expanding it to 8 teams, but as we saw, there were 2 teams that were worthy of fighting for the national championship, and putting up a little bit of an appetizer hors d'oeuvre course of Cincinnati and Michigan. While it's nice to see those teams get an opportunity, it very, very clearly felt in those games that they didn't have a legit chance to win. We see with the NBA occasionally, yeah, you'll have an underseed upsetting an overseed, but for the most part, over a 7-game series, the better team is going to win given more opportunities. So really, this is something that we're seeing baseball trying to propose with their labor negotiations. Again, from a financial standpoint, I understand that playoffs are a big, big, big money maker. But as far as the competition goes, I mean, less is more in this case. I think NFL really had it right with 2 teams getting a bye and then the 2 weaker division winners playing the 2 top wildcard teams. We actually saw a little bit more balance, a little bit more parity coming out of that. Um, I think the NFL should go back to that. I think that college football should not necessarily look to expand the playoffs. I actually kind of think the bowl system, as it previously was constituted, worked out more or less okay as far as making exhibition games goes. So just like a little bit of a cautionary tale, for putting the business aside, from a competitive standpoint, less is more in
I actually agree
postseason
with
play.
Yeah, I actually agree with you 100%, and that's something to think about when
Hmm.
you're looking at these wild card games. I mean, why do we have so many upsets? And normally wild card week, or why didn't we have upsets? And why didn't we have close games? Well, the way the playoffs used to be, didn't the 2 seed would get a bye as well?
Hmm.
So you had the top 2 seeds both getting buys, and now the 2 seed is playing teams that shouldn't be in the playoffs. So those 2-7 matchups were completely lopsided. Actually, the 3-6 and the 4-5. I mean, like, I know the Patriots Bills ended up being, not close, but Bengals Raiders was actually close. Niners Cowboys actually close. And then I think the Cardinals just weren't ready, but on paper that game should have been close.
Hmm.
Obviously the Chiefs game not being close and the Bucks game not being close, it's because you have the 2 premier teams in the league the last couple of years going up against teams that, like you said, quite frankly, shouldn't be in the playoffs. I actually agree when it comes to other leagues as well. I actually think in baseball, I know that 1-game scenario is really cool, but I don't like it. I think there's not
Hmm.
enough justice in it. I mean, we had, like, last season, we had the Dodgers had, I think, the second best record in baseball,
Yeah.
and they were forced to play in a play-in game, which thankfully they did win. But still, it's like, and I think baseball itself needs to update, and I actually think NFL needs to too. Like, forget that they need to go to the NBA model where it's like the best overall records as opposed to division winners, because I don't like the idea of a division winner hosting a game against a team who has a better record than them.
Mm.
So I think they should do away with that. But overall, I agree with you. And college football playoff is a perfect example. That 1-4 matchup has almost never been close. The stats on that 1-4 matchup, I mean, they're almost always double digits. We've had a couple close 2-3 games, but we've had just as many that have been blowouts. I mean, overall, the college football playoff, from a perspective of how close it is, it's been a dud. And actually, it just draws ratings for their show, both during the season and in the offseason. And it creates for great chatter for guys like us hosting podcasts or doing it professionally for their jobs. But like, more or less, I got to agree with you. I see the merit in what you're saying. Let's see the best teams all playing. My one argument to that, Tom, would be, though, and that's why I'm very torn on this. I'm not 100% sold. My counter argument would be, well, if the best two teams are going to get there anyways, you know what? I don't have a problem with seeing a few extra games because we're going to see those top dogs go at it anyways. That would be the counterpoint. So I can go either way with it. But I tend to lean on your side of things because, I mean, the way you're saying it makes complete sense.
Absolutely. Like, I get that it also drives engagement and viewership for the last week of the season. I mean, I'm sure Raiders and Chargers still has as much impact as it does going into Sunday Night Football to close out the season, because that was, I believe, a win and you're in type of situation.
The tie thing wouldn't have mattered, though.
The tie thing would not have mattered, no. So that's one of those things where it's like, I get that with the extra week in the NFL schedule, with that week 18, there was a lot more competition without having two teams locking up, first round buys. Maybe there's a little bit more competition in those games themselves, but on the face of it, I think the NFL had it pretty much perfect with their playoff setup, but we'll see if they go back.
And I like the NFL and MLB. Even though, like, I love the NBA as a league, and I feel like making the playoffs should be an achievement. And when you get to the point where, like, roughly half the teams in the league, or even more, I think
than
slightly
half,
more in NBA, and I believe NHL as well, then at that point it kind of loses some of its contention. The only thing I'll say about the NBA I can more go with it is because the NBA is such a league of stars that, like, 7-8 seed in a given conference typically has an incredible star that's worth watching. Granted, it was because of injuries, but you looked at some of the teams that were slotted 7th and 8th last year. I mean, you had like LeBron James and Stephen Curry, the two biggest stars in the game. So NBA is the one league where I can actually kind of, like, even if the 1 seed is dominating, there's typically a guy on that 7-8 seed that's really fun to watch the game. So my statement of the week is not too controversial. Normally, I bring a little more drama, a little more controversy. I throw some stuff out there. This one is not very controversial, but I feel like it has to be said. And that is that I think Mike McCarthy needs to get fired with the Cowboys. I thought that was an all-time worst call there on that quarterback draw that ran the clock out on his team. It's a humiliating and horrible way to lose. I know they probably would have lost regardless, but I feel much better losing by throwing the ball in the end zone twice. I actually think even if they were able to get that play off, snap the ball or Spike it, have a second left, whatever, I still think it's not the best call because, I know you're like 10 yards closer or whatever, but 2 shots at the end zone is the way to go in that scenario. I just did not like that call at all, and I did not like that hire by the Cowboys. I think Dallas could do better, but I'll say this, though. Do some of the great coaching candidates, do they just not want to deal with Jerry Jones? Because that's something to think about, because maybe that's why Dallas doesn't get a top-level coach. Because, like, quite honestly, before Mike McCarthy, they had Jason Garrett, and, like, Jason Garrett is not a top-level coach. And, I mean, since Jimmy Johnson, who was a great coach, and you saw that he kind of got run out of town by Jerry Jones, like, do the top coaches. I mean, it did have Bill Parcells for a moment, but Bill Parcells is the big personality, so he's able to handle a guy like Jerry Jones. But outside of Bill Parcells, since Jimmy Johnson, and I might be missing someone, but I don't know that they've had an elite level coach coach the Cowboys. And maybe those top guys who like control of their teams and like doing things their way, they probably don't want to deal with Jerry. And that's a problem with Jerry himself. I think he's done some really good things early on in his career with all those Super Bowls. I think he hadn't been doing great for a while, but I think now he's doing a pretty good job in terms of getting talented players. But I think if he's going to get himself a talented coach, I mean, it's kind of like the whole Jerry Krause situation in Chicago. Like, it was good for a while, but then it wasn't, because at some point you got to let the coach have control, which is what Phil Jackson wanted. So I don't know if the Cowboys are going to ever get like a top 5, top 10 coach in the league, because given their talent, given their marketability, given their money and everything, in theory, like, Dallas probably should be a destination for a top 5 coach. I think there should be a lot of coaches who should want to go to Dallas, but perhaps they don't want to go because of Jerry. So Mike McCarthy should get fired, and maybe Jerry Jones needs to rethink his whole philosophy in terms of his involvement with the team. And even if he is to stay on as GM/owner, you can stay on and do that title, but still back off. And he has not shown the need to do it.
No, definitely dealing with the Jerry Jones ego is something that coaches have to contend with. I think part of it, though, is that Jerry likes to latch onto like his guy type of thing, because the whole reason that Jason Garrett had that job was because he was the offensive coordinator under Wade Phillips when Wade Phillips was head coach for the Cowboys. And Jerry Jones made him the highest paid assistant in the NFL to keep him from pursuing other head coaching opportunities, because Jerry said, I like Jason Garrett. I want him to be my head coach as soon as Wade Phillips' contract is either up or at a point that terminating his employment with the team isn't too terribly cost prohibitive. We're seeing the same thing play out with Kellen Moore, who made that play call, and then Mike McCarthy was just like, yeah, okay, we'll run with it. So questionable on both of their fronts, I think.
And on Dak's front as quarterback, he can audible and say, we're not doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I understand, like, at that point, like, he's believed in the coaches that like got them to where they are in the season, winning the division, hosting a playoff game, all that sort of thing. And if you've got both offensive coordinator and head coach saying this is the play call, in a pressure moment, I get him not necessarily bucking against that call. But I think part of it is, you have Jerry Jones being very overbearing, and that can definitely dissuade front office and sideline talent as far as coaching goes. I also think part of that's just his evaluation, that Jerry Jones actively seeks these guys out who might not necessarily be mainstream great candidates. But Jerry Jones has been trying to outsmart everybody else for decades at this point. So wouldn't surprise me if it's a little column A, little column B.
Well, and could part of it be also that Jerry Jones wants guys that he feels like he's the bigger star than the head coach? Because is he getting a Jason Garrett? Is he maybe getting a Mike McCarthy? Because he feels like he can have more control,
Sure.
be more star power for himself. Because I mean, obviously this isn't going to happen. But if Bill Belichick, who is also a general manager, if Bill Belichick were going to be the coach of the Cowboys, Bill Belichick is going to be a bigger personality than Jerry Jones. Is he only like choosing guys that are his guy because he likes them? But does he also partially like them because he feels like you said, maybe aren't mainstream, where Jerry's still the star, and it's like, oh, Jerry did it with this guy. We didn't know about him, you know?
Sure.
And that's kind of what you're saying, trying to outsmart people and make himself look great. That is something to think about as well. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Jerry Jones, I think he played football at like
Arkansas.
Yes. Like, he has like a little bit of a football background. But I think definitely carries a chip on his shoulder of like being kind of sort of an outsider to the NFL and trying to prove that he actually knows what he's doing, and has put together some pretty decent teams along the way. But for the most part, I think he's still trying to fight that uphill battle, that image issue that he has in the NFL community, that he is boisterous, has a lot of money, likes to splash it around, likes to build a stadium that has the sun, a domed stadium that has the sun as a factor at some point in the game. Cedric Wilson missing, of course, a crucial third down ball that he was open, and then literally the sun was in his eyes. He can literally use that excuse. I mean, who builds a stadium that way? Like, this man makes questionable decisions, I think, because he's in part a billionaire and he can make those decisions, and in part because he thinks he's smarter than everyone else, which kind of goes hand in hand with the whole $1 billion thing.
Yeah, it does. And that's something that he's got to look himself in the mirror. And it's not 1993, Jerry Jones. I know you're a 3-time Super Bowl champion, but it's been a minute. It's been a minute. He did go to high school in Little Rock and college in Arkansas. He was a member of the Arkansas Razorbacks, offensive lineman for College Football Hall of Fame coach Frank Boyles, and a teammate of college football and NFL coach Jimmy Johnson. So they were college teammates. So maybe that's where he started this whole, I'm going to get my guy. I played with them. And then they don't end up working out because he's afraid that Jimmy Johnson's outshining him. But anyways, that'll do it for the show. Unless you have anything else to add, Tom?
I'm good.
That'll do it. Good show. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about the conference title games in the National Football League. And we'll sprinkle in some NBA at some point in the coming weeks as well. Maybe a little Australian Open update. Those guys just got started in the tennis world. And then, believe it or not, Tom, we're not that far away from March Madness. We'll be talking about that, conference tournament championships, et cetera. I haven't watched nearly as much as college hoops as I normally do, so gotta start studying up.
Gotta catch up.
Gotta catch up as far as my picks. But that'll do it. Hopefully you have a great day, Tom, and hopefully everyone who listened has an excellent day. And thank you for always being with us here on Salute Your Sports.